3 days in a row I've been to the cinema. Just as well, because like I say, I'm going to stop coming soon. Am I going to review a film that I've just watched that's 7 years old? Yes, I am. Because it was really, really good. I've said before that since the pandemic and stuff, cinemas have shown, I'm going to yawn. Ooh. Cinemas have shown older films with no real explanation. So I started this year, January, the first thing I saw here at the Odeon was Speed from 1995. And tonight I've just watched Straight Outta Compton from 2015. So I don't know why they were showing it tonight, but they were, and I'm really glad they were because it was incredible. I sat in exactly the same seat that I sat in for Don't Worry Darling last night, which tickled me. Screen 1, back row premiere, seat 12, right in the middle. There was only 4 people in there, because like I say, this film is 7 years old and there's no real reason for it to be on. Obviously it's not an anniversary or anything like that. There was me and there was 3 middle-aged white men watching a film about one of the most seminal moments in hip-hop history. So it tells the story of the birth of Ruthless Records, which led to Death Row Records, which led to Aftermath. But basically it's about the rise of Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, Eazy-E, and all of the guys who formed NWA. Now, the first time I ever heard of NWA was when my older sister Claire had a cassette that someone had made for her, which had NWA on. Now, we're talking what? Very early 90s, so I'm like 10. I was absolutely horrified at the lyrics. Because as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, I hadn't really been exposed to, well, obviously I hadn't been exposed to proper hip-hop, and I was very taken aback, and I didn't like it. It hurt my poor delicate little ears. Now I couldn't get enough of it. And ironically, years later, when I got into Eminem, my sister didn't like him. But it is about Compton in LA. It's about the streets. It's about what shaped these men, what experiences, the background, the history, the culture, what shaped these men into making some of the most explosive and important music of their generation. Now, for me to sit here as a 40-year-old white woman from the West End of Newcastle, I can't relate to their experience. I don't know what it's like to be a minority. I don't know what it's like to be to be persecuted. All of my knowledge of any of this, of racial inequality, comes from watching films like this. And my ex made a joke about when I said I was coming to see this tonight. He went, "Isn't that old?" I was like, "Yeah, it's 2015. And I said, "Have you seen it?" I said, "Yeah, but I've never seen it." He went, "Yeah, that's because you're not black." Well, I don't think I need to be black to come and see this and appreciate it and get a tiny glimpse into what life was like and is like for people who aren't white women from the West End of Newcastle. I mean, do I actually need to review it? I really enjoyed it. It's 2.5 hours, so it's like pushing it, but you get to see Andre Young become Dr. Dre. You get to see O'Shea Jackson become Cube, Ice Cube, or kind of already is Ice Cube. You get a glimpse of an early Snoop Dogg. There's a scene with Tupac, and it's just it's so amazing to watch all these icons and these artists mingling together. And the beautiful thing is, when NWA forms, it's so organic, and when they record the first album, they just look like they're having so much fun, and none of them expect the fame or the success that they got off the back of that album. And of course then money and wrongdoing and dodgy contracts and all that sort of comes between them. And they only come back together towards the end because Eazy-E, Eric Wright, calls them sort of back together and says he wants to be NWA again. I don't feel like I'm giving spoilers because this is actual musical history. But yeah, it's just this really interesting story with this absolutely terrifying backdrop. So, really early on there's guns, and there's guns on a school bus, and just the threat of violence, and then the way the police treat them, and you just see like, I'm gonna yawn again. So sorry. You see like a young Ice Cube getting literally trying to come from one house, from his like cousin's house or whatever, his mate's house, over the road to his own house. And the police are there, and they get stopped and they get searched, and his parents are there, and they're going, that's our son, all of these boys grew up on this block, they're not criminals, they live here. And it's just one of many instances where they're just targeted by the police. And sitting there, I was like, because it starts in 1986, I was like, yeah, this is going to tie in with Rodney King, the Rodney King trial, and the LA riots. And I was right. So yeah, absolutely fascinating. The music was incredible. The performances were just like off the scale. So Ice Cube is played by Ice Cube's son. So Ice Cube is O'Shea Jackson, that's his name, and his son is O'Shea Jackson Jr. There's actually a scene where he says to the head of Priority Records, I've got a kid on the way, or a baby on the way. He's basically talking about himself, because at that moment that would have been O'Shea Jackson Jr. And I'd read that. I knew from when it was out 7 years ago that somebody played their own dad, and it's Ice Cube. The first time you see him on the school bus, I was like, oh my, like I actually laughed. And it's stupid. He looks like his dad. Of course he looks like his dad. Lots of people look like their own parents, but it was just like looking at Ice Cube. But it wasn't, because it was his son. And apparently made him work really hard for the role. And I heard that they re-recorded the original album so they could all get into character. It was absolutely fascinating. Dr. Dre was played by Corey Hawkins, who I know from In the Heights. So a slightly different kind of rapping going on here. But yeah, it was just really interesting, believe it or not, even though I'm yawning. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Fascinating and scary and noisy and wonderful. And yeah, I'm really, really glad I came to see it. It's the 4th of October today. My Limitless runs out on the 10th. So this might actually be my last visit. And like, as soon as my money situation is better, I will rejoin Limitless, because as I said, I came on Sunday, I came yesterday, and I've come today. If I'd paid each time, you're looking at what, 10, 12 quid per ticket? So I would have spent over 30 quid just to see these 3 films that I've seen in the last 3 days, and my Limitless costs me 15 quid a month. So it's totally worth it. I just have to be sensible, and I have to prioritise boring stuff like food and energy bills. It's about as far away from hip-hop and Dr. Dre as you can get. It's me worrying about my energy bills in a car park in Kettering. So I'm gonna go, but thanks for listening. Katie out.